my childhood was not the best, but there's so many people out there that have really fucked up childhoods. And one of the things that I noticed is those that haven't lived the hard childhood are the ones that tells me the most that it's a story worth telling. Those of us that lived through it, all we want to do is run away from it. We don't want to have to keep reliving it and stuff. And I've been dreading making these video blogs about my early years. I mean, I'm open and honest about it. If you ask me, I will tell you everything about it and stuff. It's just to have to feel it all over again, to think about it all over again, brings up more emotional drama in my head that lingers prolongedly and stuff. So these videos for the book will be extremely hard. But maybe it is something that needs to be said, either for the promoting of my book to find an agent to get it out there and stuff, or maybe it might help somebody else that is either going through it right now or somebody who has been through it. So here we go. Documentary, or what do you call the video blogs? I'm calling it video blogs. That's what you all don't call it. Who gives a shit? I'm calling it a video blog because that's basically what it is, a blog on video. But anyways, I was born to parents that did not really want kids and stuff. They were volatile to each other anyways. The relationship with the external family members or internal family members, however you want to pronounce them, was not very good either. It was extremely toxic. My birth mother, although they all think that she's Mexican, I did a blood test and it's not Spaniard bloodline. But my grandfather on my birth mother's side is Aztec and possibly Southern European, if he wasn't full-blooded Aztec, which chances are in the 1900s there wasn't any left. But anyways, I was the second live birth that they had. Supposedly she had several miscarriages or stillborns and stuff, which isn't really surprising with the amount of drugs and other very inappropriate behaviors that they were doing, especially when they had children. I have one older sister who is suspected to have the same birth father as I do, although later on I'll tell you a story about that. And a younger sister I have never met. Her name was Angel at birth, and she was born a year and either 5 days or 12 days after me. Her birth date is either May 5th or May 12th. I've gotten mixed accounts as to which day she was born, but I was told that she was adopted by a doctor and his wife somewhere in Michigan, possibly in the Bay City area, which again, later on in vlogs, I will cover a story about possibly meeting her. Don't know if it was her, but we'll go over that. But at this time, we all three lived with our parents, or who we thought was our parents. They did know or suspected that my birth father, Tom, was not Angel's father. The courts ended up taking us away. There's a few different stories as to what, well, let me back up to the day when I was born. I was born addicted to drugs, or at least had it in my system. My birth mother, when I finally did meet her, denied it left and right. And then eventually I did get her to confess to at least trying to kill herself with my birth father's psychiatric medicine and stuff. But other people who knows the family or are part of the family and was old enough to remember stuff back then knew there was a shitload of drugs in the house all the time, and that we often got locked into the closet while they got high and stuff. Which eventually led to us being taken away. One of the stories that I was told was that my birth mother refused to do prostitution anymore for our birth father, so he kicked her out of the house. And then he went and got himself arrested, and 3 days after being in jail, he finally decided to tell the courts where we were at, which was locked in a shed. My sister says that she vaguely remembers unlocking the door for them and stuff like that. I don't remember anything from those time periods. I do have some early childhood memories, but it was after we were already with our soon-to-be adopted family, or maybe after the adoption had gone through and stuff. But basically, no matter whose story you want to believe as to why they lost custody of us, they did lose custody of us. And our younger sister, because she didn't have the same father, was adopted out. Hopefully she had a good childhood. Hopefully she did not go through the things that my sister and I went through. And that is the only hope that I have, that are the only thing that I can be grateful that she wasn't with us, is the hope that she had a better childhood. If not, then I would feel really bad that we weren't there to protect her. But our birth father's brother, Rick, decided that out of family obligation, which we were told that quite often, that he would take April and I. He was married to an older woman who had kids, the youngest one his age. So we grew up with our dad's side of the family. We never knew him. We never saw him, and didn't even realize that the grandfather that we were raised with was not our biological grandfather either. There's a lot of secrets in that family. But we got treated quite differently by the family. We were told about how our birth father took a knife to what we thought was our biological grandfather and stuff. We were just told that he was crazy and stuff, and there was no real explanation as to why or anything like that. Later on, he gave his story as to what happened, and that will be in a blog later on when I talk about him. We were sexually abused. For me, basically both of us, it started at the same age, but it started 1.5 years earlier for my sister. I was 7 years old when it started, because that's also when I had started menstruating and developing boobs and stuff like that. So I was sexually molested from the age of 7 until I was 13. We were beat, neglected, made to go without meals quite often as punishment, sent outside quite often, even in the middle of winter, because they didn't want to see us, or at times be forced to stay upstairs in our room, which mine had a padlock on the outside of the door. Which is kind of ironic, since I also had problems with wetting the bed until I was 13, but yet if I peed the bed, I got a beating. But if I couldn't get out of the room, how am I supposed to try to control it and stuff? So yeah, that's quite entertaining in and of itself. Yeah. The elementary school that I went to, McGregor, didn't want to believe or didn't care about the physical abuse. I remember sitting in a classroom during a meeting with my adopted parents and the school administration and teachers, and they were discussing the abuse that the punishments, not abuse, they'd never used that word, the punishments that was being handed out and how they were extreme and stuff. And I remember Rick telling them that if he wanted to beat me with a 2x4, he was going to, and they would not stop him. And in fact, I know what a 2x4 feels like going across my back more than once, because I walked into the bathroom that was being remodeled because I had to go to the bathroom. We only had one bathroom, and I had to go. And because I went in there when the floor was torn up and there was only 2x4s, leading in there, they wanted to show me what it would feel like if I had fallen between those boards. So I got beat with it. And the school didn't do anything about it. They basically backed off. So that pretty much told me nothing would be done about it. In first grade, I was doing, to me, I thought pretty well. I was learning very much, or a lot, very much, that ain't even proper English. I was learning a lot. I was spelling words that I can't even spell today and stuff. But they were trying to control my sister and I, and they tried to keep us separate as much as possible. They played games where we were put against each other and tried to get us to hate each other and stuff. And so I was held back another year, so I wasn't a grade behind my sister. I'd be 2 grades behind. And I remember sitting there in one of the classes, raising my hand to answer a question, and the teacher bluntly told me, put my hand down, you already answered that last year. And that was the sentiment that I got from all the teachers, that I had already been through all this. Why should they waste their time teaching me again? And I believe that's what led to me being dyslexic. Because the years that my brain was developing and learning, both my adopted parents and the school screwed me on. I wanted to learn. School was the escape from my home life. My home life was that bad that I looked forward going to school every day. I hated it when Rick would use not going to school as a reward for him doing sexual acts to us. I would still beg to go to school and would be denied it and stuff. But to be denied an education was even worse, I think, in so many ways. Because in education, even to a child, I knew that that meant that I could succeed and move away from these people, to get away from them. And the school allowed it to happen. The next year, which should have been my 3rd grade, which ended up being my 2nd grade, I was put in LD classes at a different school to help further separate my sister and I. School still was not catching on to any of this. And what I was learning in that class was less than what I was learning in 1st grade, which ended up being a very big trend back then. Nowadays, some of the schools are a little bit better about it, but not by much. So my education stunted even more and stuff. I started having problems with retaining some information or being able to pronounce certain words and stuff. And so I remember having a speech therapist when I went back to McGregor and trying to learn to say certain words and stuff. Some of them I eventually was able to, some I never did. And that only lasted 1 school year, and I don't understand why, because I still had the speech impediment. And it wasn't until my 20s that I learned how to say library correctly. And that was mostly due to my sister making fun of me for saying library all the time, or however it was that I used to say it, and having to slowly teach myself how to say it correctly and stuff. And then also, one of the ways Rick and them controlled my schooling was Rick was very possessive of us. We were not allowed to play sports. I did end up playing soccer and stuff, and that tale alone is hilarious and sad all at once. But if I got caught playing, I got beat. I also played football on the field with the kids, and it usually was boys because most girls didn't want to play sports. And because I refused to pick on other kids, I became an outcast. I had my chance of being popular, and I chose not to because I'm not going to hurt somebody else. I know what it felt like to be hurt, and the look on that girl's face still haunts me today. And I went and apologized and walked to the field instead of turning around and letting it not bother me. I can't. I'm not a vindictive person. If I'm doing something mean, I'm doing it intentionally, and I'm going to feel bad even if you deserve it. But anyways, Because it was with boys, I was twice as much not allowed to play and stuff. And after they realized that I was really good and better than most of them at playing these sports, they helped me not fall down and get grass stains on my clothes and stuff. And even when I didn't go home with grass stains, somehow Rick always knew that I had played sports that day, and I thought maybe the teachers were telling them or something like that. It wasn't until I saw him outside one of my classes, my science class, that I realized he had been spying on me at school. And that particular day that I noticed him, my teacher was standing pretty close to me and the girl next to me and stuff, and he did lay his hand on my shoulder. I think he was congratulating me on being able to do the project and stuff, especially since I was already in LD classes and I had very few that were mainstream classes, and science was one of them. And Rick went to the school and demanded that I be taken out of that class because the teacher was too friendly. Yeah, he was friendly, but he was not inappropriately friendly. He was not doing the shit that Rick was doing. And I ended up stopped learning science because of that. I was enjoying science and dissecting and all this other stuff. I haven't had a science class since then. That's how bad schooling is for those that are dyslexic. They don't get those classes. The most that I've had was something that was supposed to be called Earth Science, and it was reading a book, answering questions, and that our workbook, and that was it. And that was in Rosemont, and I did that over and over and over, the same fucking book, never learning. But they took me out of it. He tried to get me taken out of my homeroom, which was also, I believe, my math room. And I think the teacher's name was Mr. Lee, if I'm not wrong. But he couldn't see into that classroom because the way McGregor is set up, it's sort of like a U shape, or probably a little bit more than that, but in the particular wings that I was in, it's a U shape, and there's a grass field in the middle of the two parts of the building, and there's a fence, from one building to the next to stop anybody from getting into that field area, and he couldn't see into the classroom. So he didn't have any justifications as to why he wanted me removed from that room, and luckily that didn't happen. But it could have. Needless to say, it wasn't until junior high, towards the end of the school year, that a school took the abuse seriously. My sister had already been sent back to live with our birth father in Ohio because she did keep running away, or at least at first, she kept running away. My eldest sister had already been sent to Ohio to live with our birth father. This is the first we had heard that he even existed. At first, April was running away, but then it wasn't her choice to be leaving the house anymore. Our adopted mom, Vaughn, kept kicking her out and then calling the police to have her arrested. And the police started to realize what was going on, and it helped that one of her best friend's parents went to the courts and said they would take her, just sign the rights over to her, and they would raise her. This would have been a slap in the face to Rick and Vaughn, so they said no. They took her back and then secretly sent her to go live with our birth father. I was sent to school. I came back. She was gone. I assumed she had ran away again. It wasn't until after I started swim class in junior high. I had started the first part of the school year in junior high outside for gym, running the track and stuff. And then halfway through the semester, we switched. Those that had been in the pool went outside. Those of us outside went into the pool. I was more worried about being teased about my breasts and stuff because I grew up in elementary being teased, told that I stuffed my bra and all that other good crap. And so I was worried about that. I didn't even stop to think about the scars and bruises on my back. And it had been a little bit of time since my last spanking, as they called it. I guess spankings, back then consisted of anything they could put their hands on. 2x4s, extension cords, spatulas, brushes, paddles. And after class, the teacher stops me and asks me where I got those scars at on my back. And I looked at him like I didn't know what he was talking about, because I didn't know that I had any on my back. I can't see my back. Then I came up with a really fantastic lie that if you had seen the front of my house, you would know that it was a lie. I told him that I climbed the tree in the front yard and I fell down and hit my back on the branches on the way down. If you saw the tree, you know that it couldn't be climbed without equipment, and the highest branches were so far up, it was above a 2-story, that if you fell and hit branches, you were dead when you hit the ground, because it was also cement mostly underneath of the tree. If I had been smart, I would have said the apple tree in between the houses. But for some reason, my brain went to the front yard tree. And maybe that was subconsciously trying to tell them what was going on. But I had been raised with the fear that if I spoke about the sexual abuse, that Rick would kill April. And April was raised with the same thing, that she spoke, he would kill me. And almost a few times I blurted it out, but he always found a way to be standing there. And so I got used to not saying what was going on or lying on those. I was never really good at lying, which is kind of funny that I want to work in film. Can't lie worth shit, but I want to work in film. And so I was given a phone call with April on it to prove where she was at, I guess you could say, and they were already trying to coach me into wanting to move there and stuff, and April told me over the phone that it would not be a good idea, that I would not like it, and they told me that she was just saying that because she wanted to keep our dad to herself and not share him and stuff. I went to school the next day, and I told one girl, we weren't really friends or anything, we sat in class together, I think it was math class, I'm not for sure. And I told her that she would never see me again. I don't know why I told her that, but that was my last day at then, I believe it was Washington Junior High. Or it might have had a different name back then. They changed their name a few times. But that was the last day I was at that school. When I got home from school, I was told to pack my stuff, that I would be leaving, that my birth father was on his way up to get me. I got to go hang out with my next door neighbor, who was my only friend, the only person I was allowed to socialize with, and went to Ohio that night. Something did snap inside of me when I crossed from Michigan to Ohio, and I wasn't afraid anymore. The only emotion I ever had until that point was fear. I never knew any other emotions whatsoever. I look at pictures where I have some type of smile on my face as a kid, and I'm like, I wasn't happy in that picture, so why was I smiling? I wasn't happy that day. I'd gotten yelled at for something. I had always gotten yelled at for something. The abuses alone was enough to... My sister would laugh eventually when we got spanked and stuff. And I would just yell at her to stop, to cry, so they would stop beating. And later on in life, she told me that she preferred the beatings over the words that we were told, the things that they called us. I learned what a wetback was when I went to school calling myself that, because that's what they called my birth mother, was a wetback. Didn't know that it was an insult, didn't know it was racist. I went to school, called myself a wetback, and got in trouble. And I still didn't understand why. If they were calling my birth mother that, why was it wrong for myself to call, why was it wrong for me to call myself that? I had heard words that I didn't understand or know because I didn't see a difference in people's skin colors and stuff. I didn't see any of that. Later on, I'll tell you about the dreams that I had and stuff when I do other blogs, but I basically had dreams that taught me right from wrong. The things that I wasn't being taught correctly in waking life, I was being taught in my dream world, which sounds really crazy to people, I know, but it helped me survive. It helped me learn that certain things were bad. It taught me how to spot the bad people and stuff to stay protected as best I could. And it just, I don't know which one I would pick. The sexual abuse, the physical abuse, the mental abuse. I don't know. To me, they were all equally bad. There was one time we had went outside to play and we weren't allowed to play with anybody else in the neighborhood. Occasionally we were able to sneak and play with other kids and stuff. And sometimes there was cute guys in the neighborhood. Sometimes it wasn't necessarily that they were cute. It was just somebody to talk to and stuff. There was this one girl and her brother. I think they had another brother. I'm not positive. I just remember the two of them. They lived on the same block, but on the opposite side of the block. And we were not allowed to socialize with them. I never really understood why. I just put it off as the same as we weren't allowed to socialize with many people in the neighborhood. We never went to school dances. We never went to school activities. I just thought we were never invited to anything with kids and stuff. And later on in life, I ran into one of the girls I went to school with. I didn't really remember her or anything, but she said that in the early days that we were invited to stuff, but we never showed up, so they stopped inviting us. I never knew that we were invited anywhere. I never got the invitations and stuff. If it was something happening at school, then yeah, we did participate in it because you had to keep up appearances, I guess you could say, but going to actual people's houses or playing with the kids out on the streets, the only kid we were allowed to play with in the neighborhood was our next door neighbor. They couldn't come up with, I guess, with a justification for not playing with her. And I always hated it when she chose to go play with somebody else because I wasn't allowed to go and I left me with nobody to play with. But one day we were out and we saw Lisa's brother and we're walking and talking to him and we were trying to make sure that we weren't seen or anything, and we were pretty far away from the house. So we didn't think we'd get caught. And we got home, and sure enough, Rick knew that we had been speaking to him and stuff, and we first tried to deny it and realized that wasn't going to work, so we just said that we saw him on the way, and that was it, that we weren't really socializing with him. We just happened to be walking in the same direction and stuff. And we were sent up to our room as punishment. We weren't allowed to go back outside or anything, and we were going to go without dinner that night and all that stuff. And then April decided she wasn't putting up with it. She said we didn't do anything wrong. We shouldn't be punished for not doing something wrong and stuff. So she went downstairs to try, I guess, to convince them to let us go back outside and play, that we didn't do anything wrong. And I could hear the screaming and stuff. And somehow I managed to see it. I don't know how I saw it, because I was upstairs and I ended up on the floor screaming and crying. And I was screaming so loud that I know the neighbors had to hear us, even if all the windows were shut, which they weren't. They were all open. We didn't have an AC unit back then. And so they were beating on her. They both were sitting on her, punching and beating on her. And I could see it. And it was later on that she confirmed what I saw is what happened. I never told her that's what I saw. I've told other people, but I never told her, but she told me what happened. And in the exact same position that she told me, they were sitting on her, punching her and beating on her. I could see, and I screamed, and I kept screaming. I wanted to go down there to help her, but I was too terrified to move. And maybe something inside me said if I screamed loud enough, somebody would come to our rescue. Somebody would care enough. But nobody ever did. Ever. Later on, the girl that I lived next door to, her parents said that they knew things were going on inside that house, but they just never reported it. People always wonder why I put my nose in other people's business all the time, why I interject when I see something I don't think should be happening, why when it's not my business, why when it's not my family, and why when it has nothing to do with me. Because as that child, 7, 8, 9, 4 years old, 13 years old, doesn't matter how old, they're hoping that somebody will stick up and say something because they can't. And so I do. If I hear domestic stuff going on at somebody's house, I'm calling the cops. If I see a kid with too many bruises, I'm asking questions. I'm trying to find out why. If the kid's misbehaving, I'm correcting that damn kid. I don't give a shit. And if it's the parents overdoing it, I will correct the parents. Again, I don't give a shit. Because I know what it's like. So which one would I choose? Being sexually abused, which has left me with severe emotional turmoil. And for years, I blacked out every time a guy touched me because of it. Or the mental abuse, being called nasty names, being told I wasn't wanted and that the only reason they took us in is because of family obligation. I've never felt welcome anywhere. Nowhere I've ever been. No job, no classroom, no foster home, nowhere have I ever felt like it's my place, my home. And it's easier to be alone than around other people because you don't have to live with the expectation that they're not going to like you or that they're not going to be satisfied with who you are, or the physical abuse that has left me with injuries that on top of other injuries has made it hard for me to function daily or to flinch every time somebody raises their hand to me. It took me years to stop doing that one. One of the times I did it as a kid, I was sitting on the couch being punished, and I think I moved or something, and Rick started yelling and screaming at me, and then he came over to me and raised his hand, and I remember balling up into a little ball. My arms up over my head, my legs up, trying to protect my stomach area and stuff, and nothing happened. I was just frozen like that. No punches came, no hitting, no nothing. I was stunned. And I peeked out, and he was just standing there with this grin on his face. If, as a way a writer would describe it, as an evil smile, a sadistic smile. And he said that, did I really think that I was going to be able to protect myself? And why would I do that? And I got beat severely, and I was told if I ever raised my hands to stop him from hitting me again, it'd be twice as bad. And sometimes it was pretty bad. My sister did get more of the beatings than I did because I cowered away a lot. I remember one time she got thrown into the fridge so severely that it left a dent on the fridge. we need to find a way to have discipline for kids, because I am very big on discipline, very big. But there's a line in which you cross, and you should never cross. And one of the reasons I never had kids is because I do have a severe hot temper. I have anger management issues. Because as I said, until I was 13, until I went to Ohio, the only emotion I ever had was fear. I never had hatred, never had love, never had anger, none of that. I might have had frustration a little bit and stuff, but as soon as I felt it and seen the look on somebody's face, I knew I was in trouble and stuff. It didn't matter whose face it was, because I knew that it was going to get back to them, and I knew that I was going to get beat. It wasn't until I became a foster kid that I came up with anger. And that was my only emotion for so long. And frustration was anger. And not liking certain things was anger. I still to this day don't know what love is. The idea of the emotion of love is there by what people's standards are, but actually 100% feeling it, other than lust for somebody or being sexually attracted to somebody, is an illogical concept. I think that's one of the reasons I fell in love with Spock on Star Trek. It was because emotions were illogical, and that's exactly what I felt, is that I couldn't experience them, so therefore it had to be illogic. And they weren't being shown to me, so it was illogical to assume that I would have them or that I should have them. And the kids that are abused don't grow up with these emotions, and it makes it harder for them to show those emotions to other people. When my nephews came around, we both had issues. My sister and I both had issues with being touched, or having too much anger, or this or that. And we tried to not push those off onto them, and we tried to allow them to hug us and all this other stuff. And I would explain to them that the things that we lived through affected how we did stuff, but we don't want that to affect you. We want you to understand what is a healthy touch, that it's okay to hug somebody, it's okay to cry, it's okay to this, or this. So I'd allow them to lay on me and hug on me all they wanted, even though inside I was cringing and stuff, because I wanted to break that cycle. And that's what we need to do. We need to break the cycle of the abuse that we are passing on to the kids. Because the only way to heal society is to end the cycles that we keep implanting on each other. And maybe with my book, it will help somebody to realize that they need to end the cycle, or help them to not become connected to the abuse that they are suffering, and know that they can be above it and stuff.